Hey guys, I'm Sai and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation. This is our new series, The Serial Killer Files. This is the first episode in this brand new series. We'll be discussing different serial killers each week. We'll go through the evidence, the crimes committed, everything we can find on these heinous crimes. Needless to say, though, due to the nature of the content which we'll be discussing during the shows, they are not going to be suitable for people aged under 18 or of a sensitive or nervous disposition. We will always try and discuss these crimes with tact and respect, because obviously they're true crimes, they're real people, they're real victims, and it's important to note that this series has affected real people, families, and communities. So we'll discuss them in full, but we'll try and be as tactful as possible. But yeah, they will not be suitable for people under 18, because some of the, as I was saying to Rhys just now off air, of all the podcasts I've sort of researched or got ready for, this was the darkest. It was not pleasant reading up on it, because I wanted to make sure I got the facts right and I knew what I was talking about, because it's real people, real victims. And yeah, so our subject today is Jeffrey Dahmer. It's a dark guy. So just before we go there, just some housekeeping. You can find all our podcasts and series on our YouTube channel in video format, as well as audio download on iTunes or our Apple Podcasts, as it's called now, Spotify, Stitcher, ACEcast, Pocket Casts, and podcast.co. During these shows, you'll find interviews, podcast content on a whole variety of subjects. We've got shows on mental health, football, films, TV, wrestling, music, conspiracy theories, and much more. Plus, you will also find our new true crime series, which is debuting today. So, first episode of the series on one of the most bizarre, brutal, and scary serial killers of all time, Jeffrey Dahmer, as I mentioned. And to join me as we take this trip into the scary and brutal world, I'm very pleased to welcome my co-host from the conspiracy theory shows, Rhys. Thanks for joining me, mate. Welcome.
Hello again, Si. Hello, everyone watching, listening.
Indeed, we're doing good on the audio downloads. The views seem to slowly just build up and up and up, and then the odd video just shot up, like Die off 10 as a Rock, just shot to 1,000 views in like a week or something stupid. But generally, they just seem to go up slowly and slowly as people find them. The audio downloads, but yeah, we're doing better than I expected. You know, when I started doing all the podcasts and stuff, didn't expect more than 20, 30 viewers, listeners, if I was lucky. And yeah, we've got a lot more than that now going. We're coming up to 400 on YouTube, and I think 5,500 on Facebook. So can't be faulted. Thank you all. So let's go. Jeffrey Dahmer, not a nice man. So Jeffrey Dahmer was known as the Milwaukee Cannibal. Just a quick sort of introduction, I guess, to him. Both his parents doted on him as a child, but he was emotionally neglected by as his father was away. His mother suffered with various ailments, including addiction to tranquilizers. But she was also described as argumentative, attention-seeking, and neurotic. His parents argued a lot with his mother and father argued a lot, which meant his mum, or should I say because his mum wanted constant attention from his father. As a result, Jeffrey grew up withdrawn, reserved, with very few friends. He had a fascination with bugs and animals from quite a young age. He used to collect bugs in jars. He collected roadkill with his friends and would dissect them and take them apart, looking at the bones. And so his father was a chemistry teacher, and he thought his son was taking an interest in science. So he encouraged it, even teaching him how to bleach and preserve the bones. but he also, Jeffrey Dahmer, by the age of 14, was abusing alcohol very heavily. So a lot of this stuff is based on, interviews with him, interviews with people based, around the case and stuff like that. So it's been collected over the years. Obviously, these crimes sort of took place in the late 70s, 80s, and right up to I think the last one was 1991. So at the age of about 14, he started abusing alcohol. He realized he was gay during puberty, but the sort of the homosexual feelings soon turned to more dark sexual fantasies about domination, and particularly about assaulting or having sex with an unconscious person. And it wasn't long before this interest in dissecting animals also slipped into those families. So before we get into any of his crimes, mate, like, to me, straight away, there's like things in there which I suppose, from all the things that we know and we read and things about serial killers, the harming animals and playing with dead animals and that type of thing is like textbook serial killer. It's almost in everything, every documentary you see. A lot of these serial killers seem to have that fascination with with the dead animals. So yeah, he's got the textbook type thing there.
Yeah, addiction. That was there with him. That was prominent from the teenage years. Well, but I think he was he 18 when he started killing? 1978.
Yeah, so I think he was like 18, 19. I'd have to double check his date of birth, but I think, yeah, he's like, he wasn't old by any means, because he was relatively young when he was finally arrested.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's, in some ways, it's, if you take out the crimes which he went on to commit, it's quite a sad story. In that,
Yeah.
it sounds like his father, obviously, was a chemistry teacher, and when he saw that his son was doing that, he didn't recognize the sort of alarm bells, if you like, of ringing, and actually took it that he was interested in the scientific side of it, and encouraged him. And what he did, he taught him how to bleach and preserve the bones. And obviously, with a lot of the murders which he went on to commit, he did try and preserve the parts, the heads and bodies, and bits. So it's, you do wonder, or I wonder, should I say, that maybe if his father had noticed those alarming sort of signals or signs, if you want to call them, could he have got him help, and could he have stopped him from going on and being this like brutal serial killer later on in life? Obviously, there's no way to tell, but like,
There's not, but it's your own child. If your child was doing something like that, I think a parent's natural instinct is to think the best of their child, not the worst.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so to me, it's a very sad story, but not the story itself for the victims and his own family involved.
Mm.
Up
Yeah.
until once he's convicted and everything else, yes, it's their child, but his parents are still supportive of him, and I can't get my head around that.
Yeah, it's a weird one, I think. I mean,
It's obviously psychologically affected the parents immensely.
yeah,
But
it's hard though, isn't it? Because if you think, like, probably, if I would imagine that right up until he was finally convicted and found guilty, I know he confessed and all this sort of stuff, but I imagine his parents, like, right up to the confession, are trying to think, oh, my boy would never do this. No, it must be some
yeah,
sort of mistake. Do you know what I mean? They're like, you'd imagine that they're always at that level of almost denial,
well,
because they don't think that their
even after
child would
his
go and
death,
do that.
after his death, his mother said, "Are you all happy now?"
Fucking hell. It's
You know,
just,
it's
Mm. But like the other thing as well is, like some of his victims and his brother, his younger brother, I think it was, they've changed their names, and obviously they've tried to, go on to have a normal life as best they can, and try and lose the stigma of the name, let people track them down and whatever. But the parents didn't. They kept the name right up all the way until I think they're dead now. But like they kept the name. They didn't hide from it.
And they've openly admitted and said, they still dote on him, etc., etc.
That's madness to me. See, I can understand that feeling of like not wanting to admit that he's guilty of these terrible, brutal crimes, and I can understand the sort of, oh, this must be a mistake, or there must be my boy would never do this, that sort of thing. But then once he's confessed, and they start showing him, heads in jars and stuff from his room, that's where you got to be. That's where I personally, I'd be disowning him. I got to be honest.
Well, we say that, mate. We can't answer that unless it actually, happened, because
Yeah.
the the way that your mental capacity works and your brain works, you can easily block that out. Not saying because you want to,
Mm.
but the brain just does.
Yeah, and we're both parents. Like the bond and the relationship between a child and their parents is different to any other relationship.
Oh yeah.
And
Until you're a parent yourself, you can't even explain it.
I
I
can't
used
have an element.
I used to get it all the time. My mates said, like, the way they talk about their kids and the things they'd say, and I could understand what they were saying, but until you've got a child or children of your own, you, you don't. The love there is just, it's beyond,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Mm.
it's the most powerful force on this earth. And I couldn't even bear to think, if one of my children did something like that, how could I react to it?
Yeah, it's like a scary thing, isn't it? And like the other thing is as well is like, you know, there's people who've committed all sorts of crimes all around the world, um, and quite often the parents do stand by them, and I think it's it's still your kids, I suppose. Like I don't, like we say, it's difficult for us to sort of get our heads around because obviously we're not in that situation. And like by all accounts, everything which I read and the videos I watched, documentary I watched, said his parents doted on him.
Yeah.
They really, really, they wasn't like they just neglected him and he was left, in filth to sort of fend for himself
No, he
and
just
type of thing.
he wasn't a product of his environment, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, you
Everyone
say
is so quick. Oh, it's the parents' fault.
Yeah, you say like he did. They did. They did fight. The things I was reading is that they did fight a lot, particularly before they just broke up, and they were fighting in front of the kids, and it was quite. It started off relatively amicable split, and as these things do, they just get a bit of a life of their own or whatnot. Um, and the dad moved out, and that seems to be where he went from sort of fantasies about doing these horrible things to
Yeah. Well,
to doing them.
yeah, because
So
his mum moved away as well, didn't she? Because
yeah, so
he was living alone basically at 18 in his dad's house, or the old family house.
yeah, so they had this family home, and the dad was often away with work, and the mum was on her own, and she was, she had some issues and whatnot. So then basically what happened is the mum moved out, but then the dad, or like you say, also moved to a hotel, I think it was, next by. So then just that sort of coincided there. So then Dave left, and he's like you say in the family home on his own. And at one point, he even hid in a bush with a baseball bat, intending to knock a jogger out who he had sort of seen and taken a bit of a fancy to, and he was going to knock him unconscious and then assault them. But he didn't. He sort of waited in the bush with the bat, but he never quite did it. but that was the first time where it came from like a dark fantasy into physically harming someone else, even though,
Yeah.
like I say, he didn't do it that time. But what happened then is after that, his grades declined in senior year due to his parents' impending divorce. They were fighting a lot in front of Jeffrey and his brother. His father moved out. His mother moved up to, I think it was the grandmothers or the aunties. So he was living alone in a family home in the aftermath of his parents' divorce. And then on June 18th, 1978, he killed his first victim. So he picked up 18-year-old Stephen Hicks, who was hitchhiking to a concert. So in one of the documentaries I watched, they said that Stephen Hicks was quite streetwise. He wasn't naive, and he wasn't sort of the one to just get in and go with a stranger, which I think speaks to how charming this guy was, in that he was able to convince these men and young, some of them very, very young, one of them was a kid, to come with him. So he convinced him under the guise of just coming back to his house to drink. So, I mean, a stranger hitchhiking on the way to a concert, he was going somewhere, got into a car with him, which fine, he was hitchhiking, but then is talked into going to a house to go drinking with this stranger. And then, so when Hicks tried to leave, Jeffrey Dahmer bludgeoned him over the head with a dumbbell. He strangled himself to death. Strangled him to death. He then pleasured himself over the body and dissected it in the crawl space within the house, which is fucking horrifying, is it? First one, like, it's really grim.
It's unspeakable, isn't it? How it's.
Just don't get it, mate. I gotta be honest. I don't.
I can never fathom. You can never condone it, but I can understand revenge acts and what drives people there. But things like this,
it's gotta be.
Even, how can you even get sexual gratification out of that?
Yeah, I just don't understand it, and I think this is why you have people, like profilers and the people who try to get into the head of these people and understand why they do the things they do, and I just think they've just got to be. There's got to be something wrong or different in the way their brains are wired.
At the hearing, he'd already confessed to everything. But the main thing then was, was he sane, or was he not acting in mental capacity? And he got tried as sane.
Yeah, and he's
Nothing,
got.
I don't care what fucking profession in the earth looks at this case. Nothing about this is sane. Yes, he may have known right from wrong, but that don't mean he's not fucking crazier than a bag of squirrel shit.
Oh God, yeah, mate. Well, mate, I just think to do these things, there's got to be something wrong. So he's diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, a schizotypical personality disorder, and a psychotic disorder. So, but he was still legally found sane. Yeah. And I think the main reason they found him sane was that the planning behind it. It wasn't like he was having some sort of delusion and lost a grasp on what was real and what wasn't, and sort of killed someone. He, like, do you know what I mean? Like, so do you know, like,
well, they say that there was one of them. One of the victims. He says he can't remember a thing about it, didn't he?
Yes,
he didn't get tried for it.
No, not the first one. It's the first one where he goes back into it. Okay, so let's go in order. Try to. So we've got this Stephen Hicks. He does those unspeakable things. He then buries the body in a shallow grave in the back of his property for several weeks before then digs up the body, dissolves it with acid, flushes the remains down the toilet, and then crushes up the bones and spreads them around the forest. So, like, he knew, like, do you know what I mean? He knows what he's doing. He's got a plan. Even that's the first person he's killed, but he's got a plan in his head of how he's gonna dispose of that body without people being aware of it.
Yeah. And like, to be fair, it's not a plan anyone could really come up with or be able to get hold of the products or know what products to use. And like you say, the sad fact is, it was pretty much his dad who taught him how to do this.
Yeah, he
You
was
know,
talking
no way,
about
shape, or
chemicals and
form do I think his dad's any part of this whatsoever, and he can't be blamed for it. In no way at all could his dad be blamed for any of this.
no, but he would have inadvertently taught him about
Yeah, how
which
to
chemical.
dispose of a
Because
body.
when he would have taught him about preserving the bones, he would have discussed, what chemicals not to use because they damage the bone, or they dissolve the bone, or they, do you know what I mean, or they make it
Yeah.
softer or harder, or whatever it may be.
Still didn't teach him well enough, did he? Because he couldn't preserve everything. I know lots of the things he tried
No,
to
no,
preserve, it
he had
just
problems with it.
became too brittle, etc.
Yeah. So his dad moved back to the family home. Only he moved back in with his new fiance, um, and not long after, which that in itself must have been quite traumatic for a kid who was already an alcoholic, and he'd killed someone. He had done these unspeakable things. Obviously, the divorce had contributed to his mental state. When his parents had split up and stuff. Uh, Obviously, so not long after his father moved back into the house with the new fiance, he enrolled in the army, training as a medical specialist before being sent to Germany as a combat medic. Um, However, he was formally discharged in 1981 due to his excessive drinking, which is a common theme through his whole story. He was an alcoholic by the age of 14. Uh, Years later, two soldiers actually reported being sexually assaulted by him in Germany during that period. So even while he was away in Germany, and not killing, or at least as we know, he was not killing, he was still having those urges, I guess you'd call them, where he was, had to like assault people and dominate himself over people in a way which, well, like I say, two soldiers said that he attacked them, which again I think speaks to, like, some of the pictures. He looks quite scrawny, and a bit, depending on the pictures you see, he can look a bit scrawny and a bit sort of nerdy, if you like. But I mean, he was
I think he was an amazing manipulator of people, though.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, he must have been to convince so many people to come home with him, to like that guy who the
Yeah.
first Stephen Hicks. He was on his way to a concert, so he was going somewhere. I could understand he was hitchhiking, fine. I could understand if he was just hitchhiking,
Yeah, just a
you know,
loner drifter.
I could understand him going to his house to drink then. But like, to be going to a concert and then be convinced by a stranger to go to his house and drink is, he must have been a very charismatic and charming guy to be able to, talk people in. And like I say, the guy Stephen Hicks was he's a streetwise guy. He wasn't naive. He knew the score with strangers and danger and all this type of thing.
And with Dahmer, you never had many people who knew him come out and say, "Oh, I knew this was going to happen. He was crazy. He was this."
Yeah,
Not
yeah, no,
even, he was just, he was overly nice. He was so charming, which you had with Ted Bundy. With Dahmer, there was just, he was just a normal guy.
mm,
And there was no signs of anything there.
no,
And that shows how twisted an individual he must have been.
master manipulator, as you say, just being able to to get people to do what he wanted, even without the violence and the, the all the disgusting stuff. He was able to mentally manipulate people as well as physically.
Yeah, because I think the psychiatrist determined he wasn't a necrophiliac, even though he did have sex with dead corpses. It wasn't that he was a necrophiliac. He wanted them to be in an unresponsive state constantly,
Mm.
where
Yeah, and I
they
think
don't do
get to
anything.
some of the stuff he did to try and make some of his victims permanently in that unresponsive state.
Yeah, like drilling a hole in the skull and putting hydrochloric acid in it.
Yeah, one of them was hydrochloric acid, and one of them was boiling water.
Boiling water, yeah.
Just like,
Which the crazy thing is, I'm sure the boiling water had a worse effect than the hydrochloric acid.
oh,
Go figure. The young lad with the hydrochloric acid, I'm sure he came round and said he had
yeah,
a headache.
yeah. Mm,
And the one with the boiling water went into a coma, I believe.
yeah. Oh, seriously though, how the fuck do you even come up with that? Do you know what I mean?
I,
It's
what what
mind blowing, mate.
what makes you think? I mean, because to be fair, he's probably looked into science and doing all these things.
Remember, mate, they didn't have, didn't have Google
Oh no, but
stuff.
I mean, he
Just
learned
like,
that stuff from his dad. He's probably been to the library, he's read books on it. Where did he think? I know, hydrochloric acid. That stuff that'll burn through everything. Let's put that in their brain. That'll make them
that's
unresponsive.
it's that stuff which I use to dispose of bodies.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that in someone's head. It's fucked up.
And
So
imagine when that kid sits up and says, I got a headache. What the fuck?
that'd be freaky as fuck. It's disturbing, mate. Just the things that he was capable of doing and thinking of, just on another level to what me and you, like, if someone told you, think of the like the darkest, horriblest thing you could do to someone, and then this guy is like, and I'm sure other guys guys and girls who will speak about, but they're just on another level, and I just think that their brain is just wired just differently. I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't know enough about brain chemistry and brain function to really go into that. But I just think there's got to be. I'd be interested actually to look at like brain scans of serial killers. Like you can get the scans where you can see like the activity in different
Yeah.
parts of the brain. I'd love to be able to like get a load of like brain scans of like serial killers and then line them up against normal functioning members of society and see what the differences are and what the difference, what how do their brain work differently. Right, like obviously apart from the obvious, but like
What if
how
there
does
is
it
no
their brain
difference?
actually function?
What if there is no difference?
Then it's just scary as fuck, mate.
That's what I mean. How many people do you think are walking this earth who have them thoughts and things similar but haven't acted on it yet? Yet.
It's frightening, mate.
It's a scary, scary thought, mate.
Because the way I look at it is like the stuff that he was like fantasizing about and like the unresponsive women and stuff. That's like, well, sorry, unresponsive men. Um, that sort of shit is stuff which you can only achieve by harming other people, by drugging them and doing these brutal things to them. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
even as a fantasy in their head, the only way to achieve his fantasy is to brutalize other people, which obviously is a big problem if you're trying to. And like, he's got to be honest. I think once he killed, he didn't seem to be trying to fight that urge to kill. I know, like when we speak about some other serial killers, there's some who went long periods without killing because they they knew that it was wrong, or they knew that they would try to fight it. Whereas he seemed to embrace it almost and just kept worse and worse in what he was doing. Yeah. Okay. So he came back from the US. He came back to the US from Germany in
Germany, yeah.
March 81. But he didn't go home. He went to Florida, basically because the shame of being discharged from the army. He didn't want to face his father. And you can, all parents and people who have got family in the armed forces, they're all very proud, aren't they? And so you
But
can
he did have an honourable discharge, didn't he?
I think it wasn't called honourable. It was called something slightly different. I think it was formal discharge, which
Was it?
is basically, I think, is basically like where they haven't maybe got the evidence to do dishonourable discharge, but
They
they
know.
want you there. Yeah, I think I might be wrong about that. Someone can correct me. So he went to Florida instead of going home, and he had a job. I think it was in a diner. I haven't written that down, but I think it was in a diner, and he had an apartment. But eventually,
Miami, wasn't it?
what's that?
Miami in Florida.
Yeah, that's it, Miami Beach, and he basically he held it down for a few months. Working, he had his own apartment, but his alcohol abuse meant that he was eventually evicted from his apartment, and he went home. When he got home, he was quite quickly arrested for drunken, disorderly conduct. So dad sent him to live with his grandmother in Wisconsin. His dad had tried to help him, I think, with his drinking, but hadn't been getting anywhere. And I think the arrest for the drunken, disorderly, like the sort of breaking point or the last straw for him. Poor man didn't know what was to come, unfortunately. But I mean, at that point, his father's probably thinking, God, he needs to get a hold of his drinking so he can hold down a job and go and have a family and a career. And do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
from a parent's point of view, at that point in his life, he's thinking, oh, if I can send him to his grandmother, maybe he'll stop drinking and he'll, get help or whatever it may be, and trying to still, like my oldest now, he's sort of going up towards his GCSEs and he's trying to work out what he wants to do, and you're sort of planning, and then it's easy to sort of start thinking about what they'll be like when they're older and have a family and all this type of stuff. So like at that very point is 1981, his father's still planning some sort of life for his son, not knowing what's literally just around the corner for him.
It's great. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. Like seems like he had a lot of those like sliding doors moments where maybe if he'd gone a different path, maybe you don't know, do you? Maybe he wouldn't have turned into the person that he did. Maybe he would have anyway, no matter what.
Maybe he would have been worse.
Yeah, there's no way to tell. But
I think he was kind of always destined to be evil.
I do too. I just think if you're having those types of fantasies and stuff, that's
Yeah,
not.
I don't buy all that. It's always the parents' fault or their
No,
upbringing.
no, no, no.
Some people, like mental health problems. It happens.
Yeah,
We know about it a lot more nowadays because of social media, things like that. Like you say, back then there wasn't even, Google and things. It was
like
imagine reading about that back in the papers back then.
scary stuff, man.
Look how shocked we
Just,
are. Imagine how shocked they were back then.
oh God,
You'd be living in fear.
especially if you had like, once he's killed like a few people, and there's this serial killer out. You got like sort of teenage boys or like young men who are your children. You would just like you wouldn't want them to go out the house
No.
because there's just some guy like who's able to talk him into doing these, just going off with him.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So he goes to his grandmother's, um, and at first I think everything was going pretty smoothly. He got a job. She didn't like his drinking, but he was working, so I think she let it sort of slide.
Yeah, because he used to go to church with her and everything, didn't he?
Yeah, so it was going pretty well, only for a few months, fortunately, because he was then arrested for exposing himself to some women and children at the state park. And then straight after that, like weeks later, he was arrested again for exposing himself to two young boys. So he got a year's probation and mandatory counselling, which
Yeah,
that in
but
itself is just,
that thing with the two boys, he didn't get charged for exposing himself, or the charge got dropped, didn't he? Because he was masturbating in front of them.
yeah, yeah, that's right, yeah.
And he said that at first, but then I think he changed his plea to he was urinating and he didn't see him. So it was dropped from that.
Okay, I see. That makes slightly more sense with the year's probation and
That's why.
mandatory counselling,
Yeah.
because obviously to do it twice in a short space of time, you'd have expected some sort of harsher punishment. But yeah, I suppose if he says that and he's got no record at that point, why wouldn't people give him the benefit of the doubt, I
Yeah.
guess? Um, but unfortunately, these had awakened his dark thoughts. He'd been to the army, he'd come back. He hadn't at that point killed anyone else. The sort of dark thoughts, the dark fantasies came back. So he began to hit the local gay scene. He visited some local bathhouses, but there's just normal sort of sexual encounters didn't interest him. He found them to be disappointing. So he started drugging the young guys and assaulted them uh, at the bathhouse before eventually his membership was revoked after, being caught or
I just want to
complaints.
stop you one sec, mate.
Yeah, go on.
It wasn't that he with the sexual encounters, he hated them moving.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And that
He
was
didn't
the
like.
reason he started with the drug in them.
Yeah, you are right. Spot on, mate. I
And I think
remember.
one of them came round or something and he strangled him and then just went from there, basically.
Yeah, so obviously, yes, you're spot on, mate. So he didn't enjoy just the normal sexual encounters with the guys because, like you say, they were moving and he didn't like it. So he started drugging them at the um, bathhouse before he was kicked out of there. So he had to move his sort of depraved encounters to hotel rooms. So just before this, or during this sort of period, he attempted to steal a body of a recently deceased teen and store the body in his home. So basically, he wanted a boy who had just died,
He
wanted to
wanted
keep
to have
himself.
sex with a fresh dead body, didn't he?
Yeah.
Basically.
But when he went to dig the ground, it was too hard to basically achieve. Um, so we're up to 15th September 1987. He invited Steve Tuimi. He'd only planned to drug and assault him, he said. But he fell asleep. He woke up to Stephen's body with his chest crushed in. And Jeffrey Dahmer, he had bruises all over his arms when he woke up. So he left Stephen's body with no recollection of what had happened, just left the body, went to purchase a suitcase, transferred the body to his grandma's house, where he spent hours disposing of the body into trash bags. He kept the head. He even tried to preserve it with the bleach and the chemicals, similar to what he had discussed with his father when he was younger, because he had the plan to use the head for sexual use, but before discovering it was too brittle. But apart from obviously the distressing and disturbing stuff, it's all disturbing to be honest, mate. But apart from the bit about the head and the sexual use, the thing which sticks out to me when I was reading and when I watched the documentary on it is the fact that he woke up, he had no recollection of how what had happened. He was covered in bruises. He didn't freak out, didn't panic, just left him in the hotel room, put, I would assume, a do not disturb sign on the door, and fucked off and bought a suitcase to transfer the body. No like in between, just straight
No,
away, just gone. Like it's incredible. It's really sad, but like it is just incredible the fact that it doesn't seem to have phased him.
it's
Now,
logical thinking with no logic.
sociopathic thinking, I suppose, and it's like he'd obviously killed before. He'd killed the boy on the way to the concert, Stephen Hicks. So it wasn't like he woke up and he was like, "Oh my god, I've killed someone." Even if he'd had the thoughts and he had like suddenly, "Oh shit, like gone." Do you know what I mean? He didn't
Yeah,
freak out because he had already killed someone.
but
But like,
it's still only, it's only the second time of killing, so he shouldn't be, he's acting like a seasoned pro already. So
mhm.
it shows what his train of thought is. He is what he is.
Yeah, and I was just thinking then when you said that it's his second, it's only his second, but he's acting like a seasoned pro. I wonder whether when he was in Germany, whether he killed anyone, and it's just never come to light because he was in a different country and they've
I
never.
don't know, because he's openly admitted to all of them, haven't he? Even the one he didn't
Yeah,
get charged for, he described the whole event.
yeah. So which means you'd think that he would have said if he had done, and I mean, the only reason I could think maybe he wouldn't have, uh, confessed to anything. Maybe he didn't want to get, what's it called, not deported. Oh, fuck's sake. Can't think of the word. Extradited
Yeah,
to be,
I
to
can't see
serve
it
jail
myself
time in
because
Germany. I don't think so because I
people
think he
would have
would have.
researched it by now. People would have
Yeah,
researched it and looked at, missing persons around that time, followed the whole detective route, and even if there was no evidence, someone would have put two and two together and come up with five with the tiniest shred of evidence. And there's never been talk of this, so I don't think he did. I think the raping of the two other soldiers was his thing at that
yeah,
time, and it just
yeah, and it sounds.
escalated.
Yeah, and it does sound like he had like a little period where he was in the army, and when he came home, where he was almost, um, I don't know if I'd say he was controlling himself, but like there was like a period he was in the army, he came back to Florida, and then he went back with the family, and then he got sort of arrested for um, the exposure stuff, and almost like that sort of relit those urges to go out and hurt people.
Because I mean, he wasn't acting as if he wanted to be caught, was he? Because obviously he was disposing of the bodies, etc.
Yeah,
So he never
yeah,
wanted to be caught, but I think he was always ready to be caught.
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. So by the end, so obviously Stephen Fumi, um, he was going to try and keep the head and bleach and preserve it for sexual use before discovering it was too brittle. Um, but by now he was on the lookout for to lure men to their death for his sick fantasies. There was no sort of in and ahhing. He was looking for men, and his next victim was a 14-year-old prostitute, which he was lured with the promise of a payment for photos, um, which I guess like if a 14-year-old is a prostitute, he's he's obviously got his own issues with whatever and money and stuff, and the lure of the payment obviously was enough for him to go with him.
And they
Um,
obviously deal with CD people daily as such.
yeah, so he wouldn't stand out, would he?
No,
Uh,
especially if he acted so normal as it comes across.
yeah. So James, his name was James Doxtator. I apologise if I didn't say that correctly.
Was
Um,
he the one who was an Indian,
yeah, yeah, I think he was.
American Indian?
Yeah, he was drugged and strangled, and then he stored him for a week before disposing of the body. And one of the things actually to mention is during his in his house, quite often the neighbours complained about the smells coming from where he was storing the body and body parts and stuff. And they actually, at one point, someone came and said, the neighbours complaining about the smell, and he said, "Oh yeah, my freezer broke down, so all the food's spoiled, and that's what the smell is. I'll sort it out." And then he obviously got rid of some stuff or whatever he did. And then they complained again. And then the second time they went back, he said, "Oh, my tropical fish have died."
Yeah, the dead fish one.
And it's like, thankfully, I've not smelled like a dead body which has been stored for any length of time. I've not smelled a dead body at all, so I'm quite happy that way. But I would think that it's quite a rancid, strong odor.
I've never smelled a decomposing human body. Lots of animal ones I have, because many moons ago I worked for the council clearing away roadkill, dead animals, etc. And the smell of it is, it burns your nostrils. It's horrible. But the smell of dead fish and gone off fish is the worst smell on this earth. And much worse than decaying animals. The smell of rotten fish and I was doing a clearance for the council before, and we were moving a fridge freezer, a big chest freezer, sorry, and we knocked it over, and it was full of just fish that had been in there for years.
Ugh.
That smell will stay with me till the day I die, mate.
Oh,
I feel sick every time I think about it.
Just one of those which just sticks with you.
Oh, it was beyond disgusting.
Yeah, it's not. Oh. So, sorry, I was just trying to check something. What was the date of the first kill?
1978, June 19th, 1978, the first killing.
So yeah, you are spot on. Good memory. So we're like, after James Doxtator, we're up to March 24th, 1988. Dahmer met a 22-year-old bisexual man named Richard Guerrero, and he met him outside a gay bar called the Phoenix. He lured Guerrero to his grandmother's residence. Although the incentive was, on this occasion, was just for $50, just to simply spend the rest of the night with him. But then he drugged him with sleeping pills, strangled him with a leather strap, and then performed various sexual acts on the corpse, which is just horrifying. Guerrero's body was dismembered within 24 hours of his murder, and then the remains were disposed in the trash again. But the skull, again, he tried to retain, but he ended up destroying it and pulverizing it several months later because it didn't preserve the way in what he was obviously trying to achieve. But I mean, yeah, by this point, he's got a real taste for every aspect of it. To me, he's drugging them, he's strangling them with this leather strap. It's like the same things.
He also confessed. I don't think he said which victims it was, but he's confessed to having sex with their viscera as well. Basically, some of their internal organs. That is just.
I didn't think it could go up another level, mate. Jesus.
Can you go beyond that level? I don't think you can. Have you ever seen that film Crash?
I have, yes. A long time ago. I remember what it's about. I can't really remember the ins and outs of it.
I can't remember the ins and outs of the film, but that film, and I remember at the time reading a thing that there's loads of people who were like, that is one of their fetishes, to have sex with holes in people's body.
I'm living on a different planet to everyone else. I think. It's fucking
What happened to good old missionary and doggy? Come
no,
on,
mate.
let's stick to
Fucking
basics.
stick to the classics, people. Jesus Christ.
I know we're having a little laugh and a joke. We're just trying to
Yeah.
make this a bit light-hearted, but don't for one second we think any of this is funny or we condone any of it. This is the sickest of the sick, and the only way you can talk about these things and get through things like this is you need a bit of humour.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
make no bones, Jeffrey Dahmer was one sick, twisted individual. Probably, I'd say sicker than Ted Bundy, and everyone rates him as the sickest. But Dahmer was
See, I think he's worse than Bundy simply because
Bundy. It sounds horrible to
self-centered.
simplify it, but Bundy was just a necrophiliac and a murderer. Jeffrey Dahmer is a whole different level of sick.
Yeah, it's not. I can't even comprehend.
I'm pretty sure from the way he described it in one of his interviews, he's had sex with an organ and then ate that organ after as well. And that's it's what can even drive you? Not even thinking of witchcraft or black magic. I can't even think of anything that would drive anyone to do these things in any way,
Yeah,
shape, or form.
just don't get it, mate, at all. So March 24th was where he met Richard Guerrero, and then literally a month later, he lured another young man to his house. However, after giving the victim a drugged coffee, both he and his victim heard Dahmer's grandmother call, "Is that you, Jeff?" And then Dahmer replied in a manner that led his grandmother to believe that he was alone, but his grandmother observed or she saw the other guy was basically there. So because of this, Dahmer opted not to kill this victim, and instead he actually took him unconscious to the hospital where he had drugged him. It didn't have any more information about whether, um, like, he hung around or if he just dumped him at the hospital.
I think it was a case of just dumping him at the hospital.
Okay. Because otherwise, I was going to say, it looks a bit suspect that he drugged
Yeah, I
him and
think
then
it was a case of I don't know if he
state.
said, I found him in a bar or it was this or it was that. It was just a case of here he is. But back, like we say, back then, things like this were unheard of. So most people it wouldn't have aroused suspicion like that. They would have thought, oh, bless, he's caring for him.
Yeah. So that was the April. September 88. His grandmother asked him to move out of her house because of his habit of bringing young men to the house late at night and the foul smells emanating from the basement and the garage.
She must have known something with the smell because it would have gone on for too long. But again, from what I can gather, they had the closest bond, his nan and him. So again, it
Yeah,
could be a case of I know what's going on there, but I'm not going to believe it.
yeah. It doesn't make sense to me in that term. I just think the way I imagine those smells to be, I don't see how a grown adult wouldn't know what it is. But then I've never smelt it, so I don't know. Like, I can't say this so distinct that if I didn't know what it was, would I know
You
what it
could
is straight
probably
away?
get away with saying it's sewage or it's
Yeah.
something like he says, the food decomposing, the dead fish.
Mm.
You can get away with that, and like I say, with it being like a child, like to some people, a grandparent's love is stronger than a parent's,
Mm.
and you see it with your own parents and your children.
Yeah.
So again, it could be a case of the mind has just blocked it out. She's not going to believe that. No way.
Yeah. It's a weird one. So he found a one-bedroom apartment, North Street. He moved into the residence September 25th. The following day, Dahmer was arrested for drugging and sexually fondling a 13-year-old boy whom he lured to his home on the pretext of posing nude for photographs. So, January 1989, he was convicted of second-degree sexual assault and enticing a minor for immoral purposes, which that charge in itself shows you how different, how different a time it was. Now I know, obviously, it's like well over 20 years, but like to me and you, 1989 doesn't seem like that long ago.
No.
Because that's when me and you were like, we were growing up and stuff. So like, it is, unfortunately, as we're getting older, it is 20 plus years ago. But like, do you know what I mean? Like the second degree sexual assault and enticing of a minor for immoral purposes, whereas now it would be a much more serious charge.
And he's been looked into a hell of a lot more.
Oh yeah, spot on. So 2 months after his conviction, 2 months prior to his sentencing for the sexual assault, he murdered his fifth victim. He was a mixed-race 24-year-old aspiring model named Anthony Sears, whom Dahmer met at a gay bar in 1989. According to Dahmer, on this particular occasion, he was not looking to commit a crime. However, shortly after closing time that evening, Sears just started talking to him, which, obviously hindsight is a thing, which, is that guy never speaks to him. Does he, is he still alive today? So he lured him to his grandmother's house where they engaged in consensual oral sex before Dahmer drugged him and strangled him. So then again, the conventional, if you like, sex wasn't enough for him. It didn't do it for him, or didn't fulfill his need for whatever it is that he needed.
Get satisfaction from normal, could he?
No. He placed the corpse in the grandmother's bathtub, where he decapitated the body before attempting to flay the corpse. Stripped the flesh away from the body and pulverized the bones, which were again disposed of in the trash. According to Dahmer, he found Sears exceptionally attractive. So Sears was the first victim from whom he permanently retained any body parts. He preserved his head and genitalia in acetone, stored in his work locker, where he moved to a new address the following year. He took the remains with him. So he obviously had, like I say, it says he said he was exceptionally attracted to Anthony Sears. And it seems like he had a bit more of a connection or a obsession with him, because he kept, he stored his head and his genitalia, and he stored it in acetone, which is different to what he had been doing previously, where he was trying to store the heads. He was trying to keep them functioning for him, if you like, where he could still abuse them and do all the stuff he wanted to do. Whereas with this Anthony Sears, he seems to have just wanted to, he just wanted to keep his head and keep his genitalia. I say just, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Seems to be slightly different.
But I don't get if it was a trophy or if it was for sexual satisfaction or...
Well, I think that one was for a trophy, because I think he was intrigued, I suppose, or attracted to him, and he was intrigued by the way that this guy looked, to the point where he didn't want to just dispose of him the same way, and he kept it in acetone, which I believe it is. Yeah, I think is to like, when you see like things in jars which they've been preserved for biology and stuff, I think that's what they use. I think, but again, I can't be 100% with that.
What they use in biology and things is for helmaloid or whatever it's called.
Not flutamide. I know what you mean.
Yeah, for helmaloid or whatever it is. But the acetone was. Remember the acetone sheets used to have the old projectors.
Yeah.
But it was similar to that stuff. It was something to do with that. But it did preserve, just not as well as the other one that I can't pronounce.
Yeah, I know the one you mean, but I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. May 23rd, 1989, he was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Correction with a work release permitted in order that he able to keep his job. But he was required to register as a sex offender, which he is one of the. If he committed those crimes now, he would have. Well, I say that maybe he wouldn't have, but you'd think he would get a bit more of a stern punishment. Because like the work release, so he can keep his job. It's almost like they were trying not to. Like they wanted to punish him, but they still also wanted to try and help him because they wanted him to keep his job. Whereas I think now it would have been like, no, you abused a kid, get in jail.
Yeah.
It should be. Sometimes, obviously, there's times when they don't, but you know what I mean. Whereas they almost seem to be like, oh yeah, we'll give you the work release, you keep your job. Do you know what I mean? It's a different time and different
Are they
way
trying
of.
to help him or hide it? It's one of them.
Yeah. I agree with that.
The
It's
world
almost like,
still didn't want to believe that this sort of stuff was going on.
yeah. Oh yeah, God, yeah. This was before they had like you had the Catholic Church scandals and all this sort of stuff. Um, May 14th, 1990, Dahmer moved out of his grandmother's house into the 924 North Street, apartment 213, which is obviously heavily featured in a lot of the documentaries, the apartment, because that's where he was finally um, arrested and taken down. He took Anthony Sears' mummified head and genitals with him. Within 1 week of moving to his new apartment, he had already killed his sixth victim, who was Raymond Smith. Smith was a 32-year-old male prostitute whom he had lured to the apartment with the promise of $50 for sex. At Dahmer's apartment, he gave him a drink laced with 7 sleeping pills and then strangled him. The following day, he purchased a Polaroid camera and then took several pictures of Smith's body in suggestive poses and positions before dismembering him in the bathroom. He boiled the legs, arms, pelvis in a steel kettle with Soilex. I don't quite know what that is, Soilex, which allowed him to then rinse the bones in the sink. He dissolved the remainder of Smith's skeleton, excluding the skull, in a container filled with acid. Obviously, goes without saying, it's brutal and not very nice to even read. But I was going to say, at this point, he seems to have almost perfected the disposal of the bodies. He's got a big container filled with acid now, and he's boiling the different parts to help with the disposal. So it's almost like at this point, he's really got everything down to a fine art in what he's doing. He's he's drugging them, he's killing them, he's luring them, all in the same way every time. He's then disposing of the body in a more efficient way.
It's he's obviously read lots into it, haven't he? From beyond what his dad taught him. You know, he's researched this deep because there is much better products out there to preserve, dispose, whatever you want to call it. But it's the red flags that would pop up buying them products. Like the
Yeah,
hydrochloric acid, I would guess he didn't have too much of it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I suppose I'm not sure where you'd get it from. I even don't know where you'd get it from now, but I'm sure you could. But yeah,
I
I don't know
assume
how
nowadays it's
readily
got to be
available.
a controlled substance.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But I mean,
But back then, who knows?
hmm. Yeah. So and with Smith's, he spray painted Smith's skull after stripping it of everything. And he placed it alongside Anthony Sears upon a black towel inside a metal filing cabinet. So he had just a filing cabinet with a, a skull that he'd spray painted and stripped, and a Anthony Smith who was being stored. It's so 1 week after he murdered Raymond Smith, on or about May 27th, he lured another young man to his apartment. However, on this occasion, Dahmer accidentally consumed the drink laden with the sedatives himself. Um, and when he woke up the following day, he discovered his intended victim had actually stolen items of clothing, £300 cash or $300 cash, and a watch. Obviously, he never reported the incident to the police, although on 2 days later, he divulged to his probation officer that he had been robbed, which is difficult to find comic relief or like lightheartedness in a
It's
show
not.
like
It's
this.
not even a little bit of justice, that is it?
No, but it's just that guy must imagine being that guy. Like when you find out like years later or later on that you were literally, if he'd got the right cups, you would have been dead like in a brutal way. But because he messed up giving the cup he meant for you, he drunk himself, and then you got away. Talk about a life changing moment. You ain't gonna get many
Yeah.
bigger, more, um, more life changing, I guess, than that.
Imagine the relief that must have swept over that guy's body when he found out who he was. Because everyone in America knew eventually.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So we're up to June 1990, which to me, like I said, about 89, it feels like it wasn't too long ago. He lured a 27-year-old acquaintance, Edward Smith, to his apartment, where he drugged and strangled Smith. Um, on this occasion, rather than immediately acidifying the skeleton or repeating the previous process of bleaching, uh, where he had rendered the previous victim's skulls too brittle, Dahmer placed Smith's skull in his freezer for several months in the hope that it would not retain moisture, so that he would be then able to keep it, and it wouldn't go sort of brittle and soft and break. Um, Freezing the skeleton didn't remove the moisture, and the skeleton of this victim would be acidified several months later. Dahmer accidentally destroyed the skull when he placed it in the oven to dry dry a process that caused the skull to explode. Fuck it out. Dahmer himself later informed the police he had felt rotten about Smith's murder, as he'd been unable to retain any of the body parts. And I believe, didn't he know? Yeah, it says he was quite. Edward Smith was one of the only ones which he knew he had a relationship with. He didn't just lure them to the room, but like when I
Wasn't he
was,
the older brother of someone he did something to?
no, that's coming unfortunately, but like, yeah, he was the only one I think which he knew on a personal basis. Um, and when I was watching the one video and it said he knew him and stuff, and then it said, oh, he later told the police that he had, he was feeling rotten about, and I was thinking, oh, he's gonna feel bad because he killed someone he knew, and it was like, no, but he was felt rotten because he couldn't store the body parts. It was like, fuck it, hell,
Beyond messed up.
it's crazy, mate. Okay, so we've gone like 10 minutes over an hour already. But like, still got some time. I was wondering whether we should break it into two parts, mate.
I think
Oh
we'll
no,
have to.
we're nearly at the rest now, actually.
No, there's still a lot more to talk about with him,
There
mate. This is
is.
where he gets deeper, doesn't he?
Yeah, and the arrest itself and that. So I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll break it into two.
Yeah,
We'll record another one next week. Um. So yeah, this was Jeffrey Dahmer Part 1. It's a brutal, horrifying, horrible story to talk about, but we tried to do it with a bit of bit of tact, but keep it like as light-hearted as we can, which is obviously difficult because it is what it is at the end of the day. But we are going to do different killers each week, and just vary it up a bit, go through it. It's interesting to look into it and discuss the ins and outs and maybe how they became like that. Could they have been different? Could things have been different? It's just one of those things where it's not that pleasant. But that's we got other shows for a bit more pleasantry. You can check all those shows at Ace Podcast Nation, YouTube channel, Facebook page, iTunes, Spotify, all that type of stuff, which I said. I'll put the links in the videos underneath as well. You can find Rhys on Twitter at Shore Celtic and us on Twitter at ACEcast_nation. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, because that helps us keep producing content. Leave a comment, tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like, call us a pair of pricks, whatever you want. Just leave us some comments, get involved, want to interact with you guys. So tell us which serial killers you want us to discuss, which conspiracy theories you want us to discuss. Whatever it may be, we'll discuss it. So we'll record part 2 of this next week. We're recording conspiracy theory episode number 7 tomorrow. And I've got an interview with Fightful's Andrew Thompson on Sunday as well, which will all be out next week. So plenty to come. Join us next time for another episode of the Serial Killer Files. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining me, Rhys.
always a pleasure.
Yeah, cheers, buddy. Nice one, guys. See you later.
Bye, everyone. Take it easy.